Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I am so glad you're here. Today we're taking a look at a pretty neat knife from Kubey, and it is the model KU233, and I really like it. I'm not going to lie. It surprised me. I'll definitely say that. And if you've been following the channel, you may notice a new decal sitting there, and I'll be doing a video here pretty soon that will touch on that a little bit, but more to come on that. Here's a little sneak preview. So yeah, we'll hold off and talk a little more about that in the future. But I will say there's videos that I've filmed that I may post like after I post this one, for example, that I filmed 3 weeks ago that may not have that. So I never know what order I'm going to post videos in. So you may feel like you're going forward in time and backwards in time. But anyway, you'll see a video that will explain this a little more in a little more detail. But today we're here to talk about the model KU233 from Kubey. And this was sent by Kubey to Big Red EDC, who then sent it to me for review. It'll be going back to Big Red and either back to Kubey or it'll stay with Big Red, giveaway, I'm not quite sure, but thank you to Kubey and to JB for giving me the opportunity to review this knife. And again, I was pleasantly surprised. So let's get the short version out of the way, as we typically do for those of you who are in a hurry. What we're looking at here is G10 handles, a D2 blade, is a flipper with a liner lock. It's going to be for tip-up right-handed carry only. It's going to come in at 5.4 ounces and it's going to cost you 40 bucks. So there's your short and sweet. Let's do a couple size comparisons real quick. Let's do the Paramilitary 2, which is almost identical in overall length. Very, very similar. So if you own a PM2, that's basically what you're looking at for overall length. And a Rat Model 1 from Ontario. If we line up the tips here, we're going to see that the Rat is a bit longer. The Rat always is probably going to look like it's not actually lined up, and I may have mentioned this before, but the blade sits up off the table because I have the pocket clip and the tip down orientation, which I know is a sin to a lot of you, but that's why it may not look like they are directly in line, but they are. So the Kubey is going to be a little bit shorter than the Rat Model 1. As I mentioned, that overall length is 8.2 inches. So that's the short and sweet. 40 bucks for this guy. You can get it in two different colors in G10. You can get black and you can get tan. In addition, there is another model from Kubey that is identical that just has titanium for the handle scales. But it's a different model number. Instead of the KU233, which we're looking at, it is the KU232 Ti. And in the titanium version, you're going to pay $70. And you can get it in, I think, blue, purple, like a dark titanium, and then like more of a raw titanium, I think. I think there's 4 different colors you can choose from when it comes to the titanium. Some of them, I think, have more of like a satin or like a bead blast finish, and some have this kind of acid etched stone wash. So anyway, that's the KU233. We got the short version out of the way. So let's get a little more in depth, and let's start with the blade. So what we're looking at here is a 3.5 inch drop point blade, and that's a true 3.5 inches of actual cutting edge, measured from the tip to the beginning of that sharpening choil is a full 3.5 inches. The finish is that kind of acid etched stone wash look. It looks great. It really looks great in person. I think it beautifully matches with just the overall aesthetic of this knife. I think that was a very wise choice for blade finish. I think a satin wouldn't have looked right. So I do like that. I also like that the Kubey logo is kind of up on the flat, kind of tucked away. It's not taking away from the blade a whole lot. And then on the back side, you just have your blade steel designation. Otherwise, it's a pretty clean blade. So I do like that. You notice it has a swedge up at the top, a little bit of jimping, and that's it. That is not a finger choil. I did see a couple descriptions of this knife that called that a finger choil, and it is certainly not. You will not fit a finger in there. So that's what we're looking at as far as the blade is concerned. The handle, let's start with I guess just the size. So the handle length is going to be 4.7 inches. Again, it is made from G10, and it's got some nice kind of it's got really nice texture to it. It's plenty grippy, not overly aggressive. It smooths out here, kind of in the middle, these little cutouts where your kind of finger would naturally sit when you're flipping it or when you're holding it, and that carries over to both sides. So I really do like kind of the contouring and the milling and texturing that they did on this this handle a lot, actually. I think they did a great job. The shape of the handle is very boxy. very square. And that was a concern for me when I first looked at these on Amazon, and when JB reached out to me about reviewing it. It was just going to be uncomfortable and kind of awkward in the hand, and I can tell you that that's not the case. And we'll talk a little more about that when we get to ergonomics, but I actually like the kind of the square shape. I think it looks nice. I think aesthetically it's a pleasing design. I don't always need a bunch of curves and stuff like that. It's just very basic, kind of square, with that little cutout for a forward kind of finger choil, and that's it. So I do like that. It is going to be a flow-through design, partial, with a bit of a backspacer here. That backspacer I'm almost certain is stainless steel, not titanium. You've got liners, as you can see. They're not skeletonized, which at this price point I wouldn't expect. You've got your pocket clip here, and what I really like that they did on this handle, that they did so well, are two things. The first is, if you'll notice, the adjustment for your pivot here, it's got a decorative pivot, and there's your Torx adjustment point. I think the pivot looks really nice. And on this side, it's the same thing. Torx on both sides. Again, I just reviewed a knife that also had that. I don't know which one I'll post first, but that just makes me happy. To have two knives basically back to back in my possession that have Torx adjustment on both sides just makes me want to jump for joy, you guys. You don't understand how much I love that. I don't mind a decorative pivot, but man, I love being able to adjust both sides. It just makes me happy. It's just one of those little things, you know? And sometimes little things is all you need. So very happy about that. The really smart decision that I think they made is that they carried that blade finish, that really nice stone wash, they carried that over to the liners, the backspacer, the pocket clip, the pivots. You know, it's very consistent, and I love that. I love that they did that. So really well done, I think, aesthetically on the handle. Can't really say a bad thing about it. You do have a lanyard tube there, which does not interfere at all with the pocket clip. And the pocket clip, again, is for tip-up right-handed carry only. And the clip is actually quite good. It has really good retention. A couple times it took me like two hands to get it in the pocket, but it retains pretty darn well. It's not a deep carry, but you're only going to have just a bit sticking out, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't need everything to be deep carry, as I've said in the past. So all things considered, the handle, I think, was done well. And then the other thing that's phenomenal is that every single angle is rounded over. Everything. There is not a sharp edge on this handle, period. Not a one. And that surprised me, again, because it's a very boxy looking shape, and that was one of my concerns, but it is comfy. It is definitely comfy. And we'll talk ergos in a minute, but everything is rounded over. So thank you, Kubey, for that, because I think that's a really nice touch, and it makes for a comfortable handle. So let's talk about the action a little bit. This guy is running on ball bearings, and they are ceramic. It's a ceramic ball bearing washer, technically is what it is. And the flipper tab, which has a little bit of texturing on it, is positioned almost directly in line with the pivot, which is really smart. The detent is perfect. Like, for me, it's dead perfect, like 7.5 out of 10. Nice, strong detent. And because that flipper tab is right in line with a pivot, you're going to get a lot of kind of that whipping action, right? You get that mechanical advantage by having the flipper tab there. If it was angled down too far or just moved down lower, you wouldn't get as much of that. So this thing flips so well, and it makes a great sound. Listen to this. Yeah, no, that just, it just feels good to do that. It sounds so nice. Got such a great action. That detent is just perfect. The centering, while we're down here, we'll take a look at that, is dead perfect. So the overall kind of tuning of this knife between the ceramic ball bearing washers, the placement of the flipper tab, the detent, it just makes for a joy. It's just joyous is the best word I can come up with to play with this knife. To disengage it, it is a liner lock, and it locks up at about 25%. They've got a nice generous bevel here on the liner lock itself, so it is a breeze to get in there and disengage with your thumb and close this guy up. So it makes for a very fun knife to play with. I played with this thing a lot. I think I drove my wife crazy, to be honest with you. but I really love it. The one thing I don't love, and we'll get into ergonomics, I guess, everything in the hand is comfortable, right? In a saber grip for EDC, perfectly comfortable, you know, pinch grip, finger on the spine, hammer grip. If I squeeze as hard as I can, I get not much of any hot spot, maybe just a very, very mild one that I can totally deal with. In a saber grip, if you bear down as hard as you can, as with pretty much every knife, you're going to get your fingers kind of digging into that channel. No big deal, because I don't typically bear down in a saber grip. So the comfort is there. Again, everything is nicely rounded. The pocket clip placement, just for me and maybe for you, lands in an area in which is quite comfy. So I like it. It's a comfortable knife, and you wouldn't necessarily think that. So if you look at this knife and you say, I like the blade shape, I like the materials, the price point's good, but that shape just looks boxy and uncomfortable. To me, it is not uncomfortable. It's actually quite comfortable, and that surprised me. The one thing they did, I think, just poorly is the jimping. It's not very functional. If we get in close here, you'll see that that jimping, the valleys, are so shallow that there's not really much place for the meat of your thumb to kind of dig in there and get a purchase. So even if I put a lot of downward pressure with my thumb, I can easily just slide right past that jimping. So the jimping for me is kind of a fail. Having said that, it's still plenty secure in the hand. You get a nice grip on the G10, maybe a little bit of added grip from that backspacer kind of in your palm that does have some texturing on it. So jimping, they could have done better. It might as well not be there as far as I'm concerned, but I can get past it. So for 40 bucks, I think the design looks really nice. I like kind of those square angles. It's a nice change of pace from a lot of the knives that I've seen and handled and reviewed lately. The action could not be better. The finish on the blade and the fact that they carried it over everywhere else, it just looks really nice, and I'm a big fan. I'm surprised at how much I like this knife. So I think it's worth a try if you're the type that if this design, if this shape speaks to you, I think it's definitely worth a try for 40 bucks. I will say it reminds me of something, and I can't put my finger on it, just like the overall shape, and maybe it's just the handle shape that reminds me of something, maybe another knife. I'm not quite sure, but all things considered, I think they did a really good job on executing the design. Everything about it, it just works. It works quite well. So it was a pleasant surprise, and again, thank you to Kubey and to Big Red EDC for letting me take a look at it. That has been the model KU233. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you very soon.